Hey, welcome everyone to another episode of Beyond the Case, which is a podcast where global leaders from Harvard Business School's OPM community join in a personal capacity and they share the real decisions, life lessons, mental models that go behind building enduring companies and also satisfying personal lives. My guest today is Rusty Russell. He's part of OPM 67 in the same cohort as myself. Rusty, I don't know much about you, but we've started getting to know each other better in the last couple of weeks. So I'm glad to have you here, and I'd love to have you introduce yourself to the listeners.
Thanks, Alan, and thanks very much for all you're doing in allowing us to take a deeper dive into all the cohorts there and at OPM. It's a really good initiative, and I thank you for it. So a little bit about my background. I'm dialing into your chat here from down under in Australia, and from that country background, grew up on a regional property in regional New South Wales. Yeah, so my background is essentially what you'd probably call a minority group for Harvard OPM. Don't think there'd be too many of us, but I did not finish high school, and I'm ending up joining you at the Harvard OPM course, which my three beautiful daughters like to raise that question and wonder how could this be. But yeah, it's just to back it up a little bit. Grew up on a farm with two other brothers, three boys running around as in a childhood on an agricultural property in Australia, motorbikes, horses, hunting, all those sorts of boys' own adventure kind of upbringing. And then as we roll into the career side of things, I was convinced that a life on the land would be where I would see myself, and followed my older brother's footsteps into a large cattle station in northern New South Wales, northern Australia, up in the Kimberley region of Western Australia, to basically think Yellowstone and without the Hollywood flair. So as a teenager up there, thought that the romance of a frugal life on the of a horse chasing cattle would be where I was destined, but that was belted out of me pretty quickly. So I came back after seeing a good chunk of Australia, pretty determined that I wanted to go and see the world, and the best way to go and see the world that I could find was to undertake an apprenticeship with the Caterpillar dealership. So I set out in my late teens there and hunted down the work with the Caterpillar dealership and became a technician for a heavy diesel mechanic for the Caterpillar equipment, where I had enjoyed my career throughout doing that apprenticeship in regional New South Wales, construction equipment, maintaining construction equipment, and then moving into the mining equipment with a clear focus on I'm ready to go see the world. In my early 20s, my first work in getting out of Australia, I didn't get too far. I went over to Papua New Guinea, just north of Australia. It might only be a stone's throw from Australia, but it's a whole nother world. And working in a mine site for a Caterpillar dealer in a remote mine site in the mountains there was a terrific introduction to international work and the leadership skills, and working with the local workforce was a good start to chasing that down. And then from there, after more than a year in Papua New Guinea, my wife, then girlfriend Kate, beautiful Kate, she and I went and took some time backpacking around. We took off and went starting in Southeast Asia. We ended up in all through Europe, as you do, and as is reasonably common for a lot of Australian and New Zealanders, they want to get their overseas experience under their belts. So they head off for the look around. We landed in Europe and got as far across on the eastern side as Turkey. You certainly lose any inhibitions you might have when you're hanging out, you're washing across park benches at Warsaw, and it's a self-inflicted poverty when you're trying to squeeze the life out of your budget to get as far as you can. So we went through Europe and then landed ourselves into the UK. London was too big a city for a country guy like me, so we ended up living in Edinburgh for 8 months before it got far too cold. But I always wanted to get to South America, and I always wanted to get back to the career that I'd left behind working in Papua New Guinea. So we backpacked through South America, covering off on Brazil, Bolivia, Argentina, Chile, Peru, and I was knocking on every Caterpillar door that I came across until I actually got some work in the north Chile in the desert, grimy desert town of Antofagasta, where I first started learning Spanish. Up until that point in time, all I could really say was "Tienes agua caliente and cuánto cuesta una habitación," which was do you have hot water and how much is a room? But then I'm in a workshop with the local workforce, and I'm starting to understand the starting to build conversational Spanish, and of course the tool as a technician, your toolbox is every single item within your toolbox has now got a different name. Fractions, so a spanner, which was 15/16, is now a 15/16 llave. And so there was a lot of learning that was required to start to build on a Spanish capability. And then from there, I was able to secure the work that I was really looking for, which was at a Caterpillar dealership in Peru. And, I've spent, so I took on a supervisor role, the work in the Peruvian Andes there at a mine site called Antamina, living a boy's own adventure. Kate was there, joined me. I was the resident with the permit to work. Fortunately, Kate and I had done a lot of travel by then, and the passport was full of stamps already because her passport required to be renewed every 3 months. And started to look like a drug mule by the end of it, with so many Peruvian stamps in and out. So we lived a great adventure there. The work was terrific. I enjoyed working with the Peruvian workforce there as supervising the team, and a whole new level of Spanish. It's one thing to be a contractor on a mine site and then have all your emails in Spanish, and then your daily huddle meetings with the owner of the equipment can get quite heated. So to be able to hold a conversation in your second language is one thing, but to be able to hold a heated argument in your second language was a whole new level. So our time there in South America, we were there from heading to Papua New Guinea and the backpacking and the traveling around and living in South America. I was out of the country for about 6 years. And towards the end of it there, unfortunately, sadly, and suddenly and unexpected, Kate's father did pass away. So we didn't rush back to Australia at that immediately, but it was a crossroads. Okay, what should we do? Do we live this expat life like a lot of the people or some of the people I was working with indefinitely, or do we start to think a bit more entrepreneurial and consider starting a business? So I was reading a couple of books that had an influence on me around that time, Rich Dad Poor Dad series, and especially the Cash Flow Quadrant, and then moved into Myth around that early days before we started our business. And that was probably formative of getting some entrepreneurial spark. Yeah. So 20 years ago now, we returned from South America. Well, just before I returned, we did go up to the northern seaside surf town of Mankara, where I asked Kate to marry me, and thankfully she said yes. So that was a nice bookend to our time in South America. But we came back and started the business Double R, which is essentially from day one, which was just one man in a service vehicle. Myself, we were providing contract maintenance service to mining equipment in the regional New South Wales, which set our 20th anniversary recently. And since those days, we've grown from the one-man startup operation to about 250 team across. We've got 8 locations, half of those in New South Wales on one side of Australia and half of them in Western Australia on the other side. So we're quite spread by geographic distance and operations now. Now is what started in essentially a pure contract maintenance sense continues to do that into mechanical repair and engineering activities, but we also, half of the business operation now is dealership based, where we sell trucks, construction equipment and agriculture equipment, as well as doing the maintenance in the regions that we cover.
Phenomenal. Thank you for that very detailed background on your journey to starting your business. Given the amount of traveling you did in the 6 years that you were outside of Australia, how do you think those moments of discomfort when you were traveling, when you were probably close to going broke, or when you were adapting to a new environment, learning a new language, how do you think that came into play when you decided to start Double R, right, where you essentially had no foundation, nothing to build off? Were you scared at that point, or were you used to that mindset of being uncomfortable?
It's a good question, Simon, because the independence that working in these remote locations and in sometimes challenging environments, the independence that generated, has definitely been a good assistance to the evolution of myself personally and the leadership of the team and the Double R side of things. So there's a strong level of what's the worst can happen kind of situation. I know that we the countries that we passed through and spent time living in, you know, they had their cultural challenges, and there was a lot of poverty. And I do remember leaving the small town in the Andes where we used to live. Our house was at 3,200 meters in altitude, and the workshop that I used to spend 1 week on, 1 week off thereabouts was at 4,600. So it's well high into the Andes. And yeah, the slums on the edge of town, the slums on the edge of Lima, it certainly opened your eyes up to, you know, the fortunate life that you can live with a roof over your head and everything catered for. So there was certainly a level of, especially in those early days, well, what have we got to lose? Let's give this a crack and see what happens.
Talk to me about your relationship with your brother. What was he doing during these 6 years? Because I know he was a big influence in your lives. If you could just
Yeah, I have two brothers, brother Geordie and my older brother Jack. So my older brother Jack, which is jumping ahead a little bit, but unfortunately, I'll try not to get too emotional in this part of the conversation. But unfortunately, just before his 49th birthday, he left us. He was living that life in northern Australia, and through a light aircraft crash, and it involved some power lines and a river that was crocodile. Unfortunately, he did leave his beautiful daughter and 10 years of age and son behind, Henry and Georgina. So, yeah, that double R was quite well established by this point in time. And it did really bring home the importance of what we build as a business to make sure that, that it didn't rely on myself to be the one that needed to be able to do everything to keep everything running. Since the early days of Double R, we've built a really strong team. We've focused on culture, and a lot of that early days team are now hold executive roles within the business. So when something like a major family tragedy occurs, it's really good to know that you can place one phone call, send one text, and say, I'm offline for as long as I need to be. That's really the positive out of that really challenging time. But yeah, the loss of Jack, he's terribly missed by many every day.
may he rest in peace. And again, extremely sorry for your loss. Rusty, the reason I asked you that is because I'm aware that, that led to a lot of introspection for you as well. And you spoke about being a key decision maker for a business, maybe in a business perspective. And could you walk us through what that introspection was like for you in terms of how you took certain decisions in life going forward?
The decisions taken, there was a lot of validation on beliefs and decisions previously taken on once something like that really took hold. Like I touched on there earlier, I think there's a couple of, I love books. I read and devour as much as I can. And, books find you at a certain time. And I do remember, like I touched on before, I know I've mentioned a couple of times, but they find you when you kind of need them. And what was it, that E-Myth quote early in the piece when he's talking about building systems and building people that do it? He's like, if you if your business relies on you and can't operate without you, then it's not a business, it's a job, and you're working for a lunatic, something to that effect. But, so early in the piece, I was focused heavily on, let's build a team, let's not make it reliant on me. So as things evolved and, something like there's a you know, number of things that happened, bucket list items that might have got pushed further forward. I, I wanted to write my own book. It was on the bucket list, and with Jack passing, I thought, right, I'm gonna take that project on and make sure it happens, and call it a insurance policy for my own three beautiful girls, Abby, Bella, and Lucy.
You could have written about your business, you could have written about how great you are, how big your company scaled, and you chose to write about everything you've learned in life and leave it behind for your three beautiful daughters, like you mentioned. Why go that route?
Well, for me, like I said, I do like to read, and I didn't finish school, so all the education if I've had any at all, has been self-inflicted. Biographies are a terrific way to trial and error is a wonderful way of learning, but it's much better and more efficient if you can learn from other people's mistakes and successes. So the biographies of other people are high up there on my preferred reading list. As yeah, I'll read several self-development type books. I really like the analytical type of books that dive in and take Malcolm Gladwell's style of writing, where he really finds a direction that something is taken and delves deeper and deeper. But all of those books, to be successful, I feel they've got to be entertaining. There's nothing worth, nobody wants to sit through a textbook style to try and educate themselves about a topic. So hopefully my book that I put together meets that. But that's the whole, you are trying to share the educational elements too, but at the same time, you're trying to wrap a real fun story about it, about what it's like to ride a dirt bike from the Andes down to the coast in Peru, and end up on one hand at the start of a glacier and end up at the sand of the Pacific Ocean. You got to build a story around at the same time. So hopefully the message is still captured within that, but the reader gets a good laugh at the same time, and enjoyable.
I'm fortunate that you shared a soft copy of that book with me beforehand. So I just want to pick on a few of the takeaways that you have at the end of the book. And maybe you can elaborate on, what you're trying to communicate there, or what your daughters may want to latch on to. You are already an ovarian lottery winner. That's what you start off with.
Yeah, I stole that one from Warren Buffett. So credit to Warren Buffett. So to add to that, so what is my interpretation of what the ovarian lottery winners are? Yeah, I mean, that's growing up in a loving family, being given the opportunity for education, and it doesn't mean that you have to be born with millions and a trust fund, but you got the basics. You got a roof over your head, like by saying that you're not in the slums of Lima or on the outskirts of town. You're not, hopefully you're not living on the streets, but even in every situation, it's often a case where you can find somebody who's in a worse situation. So it's about seeing the benefits of what you've got at hand and what you're doing with it. Not trying to find blame or excuses as to why there's no hope.
The next one you say is you are who you hang out with. And I'm
Yeah.
curious, why did you feel the need to put that in? Were there any experiences in your life which made you realize the power of your circle?
For sure, sure. There's times in my wayward early teens and later teens that I could see that, as the saying says, you are the average of the 5 people you spend most of your time with. Tony Robbins is probably the first person I heard mention it, but I think the credit needs to go to Jim Rohn. But yeah, there's definitely the times when I've realized that I wasn't being aggressive with my own goals or self-development. It's the people that you are spending your time with. You want to be the bottom end of the spectrum of everyone else performing better than yourself, so that they drag you up as an average. I managed to bash the tennis ball around the tennis court quite a lot as a kid, and you always play better when you play against somebody better than yourself.
And then at one point, you are encouraging your daughters to get out of their comfort zone.
And
Yeah.
getting out of your comfort zone is where you're going to find success. It's not going to be where you've been spending the last 5 years. There's no doubt about that. Out of comfort zone is the worst thing about a comfort zone is it's comfortable. So it can be a bit of a challenge to push yourself out there. But every major success that I think of Double R having over the years, or the growth of ourselves, myself individually, Kate and I as a mother and father, our family, as it's always been associated with some level of, okay, we need to push this out of the comfort zone. Double R
It
as a
then
business, Double R as a business, probably our biggest comfort zone leverage point was when we'd been growing and we had all of our activity in one geographic location. We had customers. We had about 40 staff. And of that 40, we were servicing customers that I could count on one hand in one location, in one industry sector. And a downturn came upon us. And within a relatively short period of time, we were staring down the barrel of not having nearly enough work required to keep that number of personnel active. So we were looking at opportunities elsewhere in a hurry and time. But an opportunity present, an acquisition presented. It was over in Western Australia. It was 3,500 kilometres away from our existing base. It was at two locations, two workshops in the hands of administrators, liquidators. And over the course of, this would be a record acquisition for us, even for ourselves now, but over the course of 24 days from finding the advert for the expression of interest to settling on this acquisition and trading in day one, it was only 24 days. And that was a clear case of, well, we really don't see a lot of future in our current existing location. We either do this or we'll go out the back door anyway. And we did it. We made it work, and then it really gave us the strategy of, okay, that worked. We're now spread geographically across different, same sort of same industry, but different sectors. We still had teams of technicians, and we were still fixing equipment. But essentially, that spread of geographic location and industry activity gave us the strategy and gave us the roadmap, if you will, that essentially has built the company to what it is today. So that was a big step out of the comfort zone institutional for the organization.
Incredible. Why do you encourage them to take a gap year? What's the significance of that, and what's your thinking behind writing that?
For the younger generation, I do think that, and this is where Australia probably differentiates a little bit. Not everyone in Australia takes a gap year, but it's not that uncommon either post your studies or before your studies to go and experience and go and work in another location or go and experience another country. I'm an advocate for it because I think that ability to escape your own silo of what you're used to seeing, you'll mature yourself beyond what otherwise would have been. So yeah, for young people, I think it's got a lot of merit. Go out and see the world a little bit before you lock yourself into your chosen career, or in the case of what I did post my apprenticeship, was sort of fortunate enough to build my career into the extensive gap year / travel. That was a little bit different, I suppose.
Okay, the next part's my favorite. I want to know about books. You're encouraging them to read books, and I know you're an avid reader as well, as you've mentioned here. And at the end of your book, you've listed out quite a few books that have influenced you. Could you name a few and talk about why those left an impression on you?
Yeah. There's terrific biographies that are really well known. Walter Isaacson's list of all the famous figures that you would expect, like Benjamin Franklin, Steve Jobs, and Elon Musk. Those ones, of course, should be on your list, and you should know that. But I really enjoy coming across the obscure biographies of people they don't have to be business people, but the people that have in the stories. The one that comes to mind that um, I'd like to share with the podcast is Only Two Seats Left by John Anderson, who was the founder of Kentucky Tours, a New Zealand guy who in the 60s went over to the UK, wanted to see Europe, so hired a bus that had 12 seats, including the driver, put a note up on the hostel to say, only two seats left. And then, so great marketing. And then decided that he would divide the cost of his planned trip around Europe in this minibus by 12, because there was 12 seats, including the driver. And then he realized he should cross that out and divide it by 11, so he didn't have to pay. And then, I don't know if you're aware of it, but I've never been on a Kentucky tour, but they're very well known, and there are lots of Aussies and Kiwis, and I'm sure other people from all around the world that have spent time in their teens or 20s traveling around Europe on Kentucky tours. It became a massive business. So the biography, for example, is a roller coaster ride of trial and error, wins and losses, and with a surprising end. So there was terrific learning in that. So I'll share that one. And from one of those examples of a really analytic but fascinating read for me was Grit by Angela Duckworth. This is a little bit like Malcolm Gladwell and how they delve into, but it's a delve into success and what makes up success, and how the world is not necessarily ruled by naturals who just seem to be amazing at things. It's actually ruled by people that have passion and perseverance, and little things like the importance or the knock on effect of long sustained practice in childhood can actually deliver more perseverance and in adulthood. So regardless of how good you get at the thing. So if you practice the flute as a girl, as a young girl or boy during your schooling years consistently, you get this level of grit that actually pays off in whatever your chosen field is, regardless of how good you actually get at playing the flute. So, there's two books that I find are standouts.
Rusty, do you expect your daughters to get into business once they grow up? Do you talk to them? Do you coach them on an active basis on how to think like an owner, or has that stage not come yet?
No, it definitely has. I think from a business, it's very easy, especially in today's world, that employees think of what they're entitled to, what they are expected to receive. And I think that's really healthy for even an employee. So as they enter the workforce post schooling, to think about value and what value an employee can deliver to a organization and how their actions impact the customer. So I think even those types of conversations, whether they end up moving towards business of their own or not, I think the message is still clear. I am a big fan of that cash flow quadrant analysis of the four characteristics that exist in today's corporate world or commercial world, you might say, where the employee, the self-employed, the business owner, and the investor, and each of those four quadrants have a different characteristics. None of them are right or wrong, so there's no place to be. But it is interesting to actually look at what makes up the employee characteristics, what makes up the self-employed characteristics, and what makes up the typical business owner characteristics, and then the investor, so that they can think, well, which one would I like to, which one would I aspire to be in? So yeah, so there's definitely conversations that happen. Some of them are subtle, and some of them they're probably, Dad, would you stop talking about this again?
I want to also focus a little bit on OPM because that's how we know each other. Given all the success you've seen, everything that you've transpired through as well in your journey, what encouraged you to go back to school and choose OPM as a program to participate in?
Yeah, I mean, as I've discussed, any level of education that I have is certainly self-driven. I live in regional New South Wales, so it's a small country town. So you really have to go and find those opportunities to get the experiences and get the outside of the open up the blinkers, so to speak. YPO as organisation has been very helpful for that reason over the years. I've found, just meeting with fellow YPOers, that organisation that is really driven by leaders of medium to large size businesses. That's been a terrific benefit for somebody who, lives regionally. So on the back of that, I've met a few that have participated in the OPM course, and it's always been on my bucket list. Harvard OPM. You know that if you're not going to finish high school and you want to skip everything in between and go straight to Harvard OPM, I thought that would be a pretty good way of going about it. And I think it's pretty cool that having missed all that earlier education, that somehow there's a Harvard alumni status in the mix there, which I actually had to ask the girls what that meant. I didn't know what it meant when I first started looking into it.
And what's been your biggest takeaway from Unit 1 that you find yourself revisiting?
There's a lot of relevance to what they discuss at the Harvard course, at the OPM course, to double our business. We run a very much an operational business where we have a team of technicians. Half of our executive team have a trade background, and that's probably part of why we are the good stuff that we do. So there's no doubt there's good parts to that aspect. But the OPM operational excellence that was Anath Raman's side of things, I found quite relevant to what we do. That sort of mantra around building an operating system where ordinary people that haven't finished school like me, can deliver extraordinary work. That really resonated as he was going through the case studies of Toyota's production system, Oberoi and Zara the clothing. So manufacturing, luxury hotels, and retail logistics. Seemingly very unrelated types of business, but seeing how they're stringing together of building a competitive advantage through operations. So that was really effective. Also, the Barry Wim case was a case about, I found the strong connections there with what we do, because a lot of the growth that we've achieved has been done through acquisitions, and a lot of the growth in that organizations was, although at a far larger scale, was done through acquisitions, yet it was tying in culture and tying in strategic acquisitions. They never went and competed against private equity and they actually hunted down ex-founders that wanted to exit their businesses, but were really focused on supporting their team. So, that resonates a lot to me as far as, future growth of Double R. How do we find those next acquisitions to continue what we do without it just being a race to the top on the acquisition price? So there were some good connections there. I really got a lot out of the negotiation piece because, like I touched on there, acquisitions has been a strong part of the growth that we've undertaken. I learned a few things that I was probably being a bit too nice. And one of the messages within the negotiations that was training that was done through Kevin Mohan is, to be more aggressive with your targets. I probably concede in the past that was probably something left out. But we went through the role playing exercise when we were buying real estate, and how good was it? So when you actually, at the end of the role play exercise, you got to sit down. I had Rafael from Brazil in the pair of us, and hear what they were thinking and what the responses against. And so I actually was quite pleased to hear that my extreme anchor that I led with had some impact on his response back to me. So, I learned a lot on the negotiation side of it. I found that really, and then of course everyone likes Das's lectures, and I think a bit like the books that I spoke of, education, learning should be entertaining. And Das certainly had us all laughing as he was going through the make the customer a hero and adjacencies. So lots to learn, lots relevant to what we do. And I need to, the whole point of going to Harvard for the OPM course for myself and Double R is really trying to get a clear picture in my mind and strategy and direction. And what are we going to do in our third decade as a business? So it's still evolving, but I can certainly see the connections to what we were being taught to what we need to do in our third decade.
Rusty, do you see a role for AI in your business, or have you already started exploring that?
We're very early in that stage. I would like to sit back and say we're all over it, but we're not. But we have identified the operational ways that we can see efficiencies and improvements. So we are in a very traditional style of business where technicians undertake repairs and products get sold, parts get sold. On the positive side of it, as we 2026 is a year that we are really starting to see probably which organization is best to help us. I think we've identified that we're going to need some outside help, even though we've had a close look internally and we know what we want to do, but we're probably a bit concerned that we'll go about it internally the wrong way around. So we are likely to draw on some outside expert help. But the positive side of it is that this industry is pretty flat footed that we currently work in. And if we take the approach of seeing where operationally we can get efficiencies, it won't be hard to be a step ahead. But so I am actively investigating how we are going to do it, but I can't sit in front of you and say that we're leaders of the pack by any means.
Fair enough. My very last question for you is, how would you define a wise man?
Wise man, in my opinion, or would definitely relate to the experiences that they've had and the learnings that they've got out of those experiences. The bucket list items that we've had over the years, those out of comfort exposures that the business has had, as the people within the business has had, and the family have had. That's definitely in my description of how do I see people of a career, of a lifetime, just because they've got a number of years on them, if they've failed to realize that their task on while they're on this earth was to just to ram as much life experience in as possible, then they're probably going to be a little bit further down the wise spectrum, if you might say. I know that as the adventures that Kate and I went on in our earlier years before Double R, traveling and living overseas, the bucket list items that we've taken on, we did manage to I was 18 years into the business, and we decided, probably a little bit of pressure from myself for thinking that, after losing my brother Jack, and soon after losing my mother, who didn't survive the trauma and the heartache of losing her elder son, and let some cancer come back in, or some cancer come back in. We decided that it was our time to take a family gap year. We took a full year off and went and lived in Spain, and give the girls the opportunity to learn Spanish, and give the team at Double R the opportunity, or not that they needed necessarily the opportunity, but I'm very thankful and indebted to the team for how they stepped up and took full control and gave us as a family the opportunity to go and have that experience. It's one thing to take a month off work and make yourself available to go to Harvard OPM and leave your work behind. But it's quite another thing again to walk away and be in another continent for a full year and have the experiences. But um, so the wiseness, I hope that that all that want to gain wisdom will do so by the experiences they put themselves out there to get amongst.
Thanks, Rossi. Quite commendable the love that you have for your family, the fact that you chose to write a book for your three daughters called Freedom of Choice, where you're downloading all your life experiences and best practices in a concise format for them. So I really applaud that, and I hope we all get a copy or get our hands on it. We Could you tell us where we could buy it? Is there a link?
Well, I haven't actually put it out there for sale. I've only done a self-published small batch print and handed it out to anybody who showed any interest in it. And I'll leave that up to you. You finish it and you tell me if I should make a way to get it onto a shelf somewhere. I'll bring you a hard copy next time we catch up and for my LG, which were a great LG to have on board in Harvard when we were there.
All right, man. Sounds good. Thank you for your time, Rusty. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you, Son. And I just want to add there that we talked about the adventures and the growth and success of the company, but we're well and truly still on our journey. We're still making improvements as we go. We're still finding ways that we're going to continue to grow. So we've certainly by no means arrived at our destination. It's all a work in progress, but I'm enjoying the journey as it goes, and I'm looking forward to the next couple of OPM sessions. And thank you for yourself, Soen, for allowing ourselves. I've been an avid listener of all the podcasts, and it's been terrific to extract a bit more wisdom and knowledge out of what other people picked up out of the sessions, and it's been like having somebody else being a scribe for you and all the notes that they've taken on your behalf.
Thank you, Rusty. That means a lot. Appreciate it.